Parshas Beshalach, today's shir is called Avoiding the Philistines. And we're going to look at the very first pasuk of the Parsha. It says, Vayihi Beshalach Paro es ha'am, that when Paro sent out the nation. Now this is sort of giving a lot of credit to Paro. I mean, did Paro really send out the nation? What is going on over here? Why are you sort of like giving like the credit to Paro? Oh yeah, I sent them out. What do you mean you sent them out? You had no choice. So why don't you just say Vayihi b'tzeis Yisrael mimitzrayim? That's what the pasuk should have said. And then V'lo nacham Elokim derech eretz Philistine, and that God did not allow them to guide them by the territory of the Philistines, ki karovu, because it was close. Ki amar Elokim pen yinachem ha'am bir'otam milchama v'shavu mitzrayim, because God said maybe the nation will have remorse when they see warfare, and they're going to return to Egypt. So there's a lot of discussion about this pasuk. The first thing to note is the Mechilta, which says Vayihi Beshalach. He says Ein shiluach b'chol makom ela livoy. That the word shiluach in many places in Scripture means escorts or escorting someone. And so when it says that Paro sent them out, it really means that Paro escorted the Jews. I mean, you just imagine this image of the king of Egypt walking out with the 600,000 men, 600,000 women, and all of their children and livestock and possessions, and he's there escorting them out. So what is the Midrash trying to portray for us? And why is it necessary for us to know that Paro was part of the entourage that left Egypt with them? And he says, goodbye, Jews, have a good time, right? Like that just seems so contrary to what we're used to thinking when we read the story. So what is going on over here? So there's two pieces from the Shem Mishmuel that I've tried to condense into just these two paragraphs, even though there's a lot of text. But let's try and see what we can get through. One is from Tafresh Ayin Hey, and the other one is from Tafresh Ayin Beis. And of course, Rabbi Shmuel of Sachatchav, from the Sachatchav Hasidic dynasty, he lives into the 20th century, Rav Shmuel Borstein, and just a very, very powerful Torah commentary. So he writes as follows. He says, V'hinei kavod kedushas avi admor zatzal. He's referring to his father, Rabbi Avraham of Sachatchav, who was known as the Avnei Nezer. And he used to say, Shelashon Plishtim himolashon mefulasha b'shas. He says, what does the word Philistine mean? Where does the word Pelishti come from? He says, we have a word in Hebrew called mifolash, which is found in Mishnaic Hebrew. Mifolash means, it refers to a kind of street or alleyway which is open on both ends, which when you want to say that something is mifolash, it means that if I come to an alley, I know that it has an entry, and I can cut through the alley all the way to the other end and get to the other side. In contrast to a mavui satum, which means a closed-off alley, so it's like leads me to a dead end. So the word mifulash means I can cut straight through from one side to the other. And therefore, the word Pelishti has something to do with that concept. Now, what in the world does this mean? Let's see what he's saying. He says, Hainu shekoach hara shebahen mifulash mikol midot ra'ot. He says what that means as far as the Philistines are concerned is that they are open on both sides and represent the full gamut of negative qualities. And let's see what he means. He says, V'nireh lefaresh, this is the way we would explain it. Dehinei matzinu shemitzrayim hayu shtufim ba'arayot biyoter. We find that Egypt, their sort of negative quality, their hallmark negative quality, was licentiousness, lewdness. V'hakatuv me'ir aleihem asher basar chamorim bisaram. As it says that they were very, very physically entrenched in like physical gratification and all of these other things. V'chein mefurash b'Yechezkel. V'ilu haKena'anim hayu shtufim ba'avodah zara biyoter. He says the Canaanites, by contrast, which was the indigenous peoples that were living in Eretz Yisrael, their crime or their sin by which they were known in the ancient world was not so much licentiousness, even though the Torah does describe that they committed all matter of lewd act, but they were more known by the fact that they were idolatrous, that they were more known to be intellectually perverse, whereas Egypt was more known as being physically perverse. As we know, the Talmud tells us that when the Jews came into Eretz Yisrael, they couldn't find a hill or a mountain which had not been used for idolatry. Upelishtim, and I'm just condensing this as much as I can. He says, Upelishtim hu hamemutza beinehem. He says, what were the Philistine people? The Philistines are geographically and ideologically placed in between Canaan and Mitzrayim. Now just imagine what part of the Middle East are we talking about? Gaza. Or Gaza, right? That's exactly what we're talking about over here, Gaza. And he says, Vehem kululim bitrain, hainu arayot va'avodah zara, kimishpat kol memutza sheyesh lo mikan u'mikan. And if the Philistines represent that conduit, that bridge between Egypt and Canaan, then that's why they're called mifulash. They represent that gateway to bridge between Egypt and Canaan. Imkein harei koach Pelishtim kalul mishtehem mitzrayim u'miknan v'chein artzam nitzeit bein Mitzrayim v'bein Canaan. So that's what we just mentioned. V'alkein kamo bikdusha be'emtzaut midato shel Yaakov Avinu hayu Avraham v'Yitzchak klulin ze bazeh. He says, and we find the counterpart when it comes to holy concepts. That ideologically, Yaakov Avinu represents the bridge between Avraham, who is Chesed, and Yitzchak, which is Gvura. Avraham represents one aspect of holiness. Yitzchak represents another aspect of holiness, and Yaakov represents the bridge between the two of them, which is why you need 3 generations of avot. He says, "Kein lahavdil be'emtzuot pelishtim hayu Mitzrayim v'Kanaan klulim ze bazeh." And similarly, when it comes to impurity or negativity on a spiritual plane, you find the same idea. You can find ideological hallmarks of different nations or geographies, and then you find that geographic bridge between the two represents the confluence of those two into one. Ulefi ha'amur yuvnu divrei kavod kedushat avi admor zatzal de plishtim hu lashon mefulash de kamo bikdusha Yaakov hu habariach hatichon amavriach min hakatzeh el hakatzeh kein leumato betuma hayu plishtim. Now you understand what my father meant when he talked about the idea of mifolash or mifulash. He means to say that just like you can have a bridge to bridge 2 types of holiness, you can have a bridge to bridge 2 different kinds of tuma or negative qualities. Yes?
Isn't it interesting that the word Philistine has made its way into the English vernacular, meaning exactly what he's saying here?
Yes, I thought that was interesting. That's why I decided to bring it up today. So you, Baruch Shekivant, you're touching on what I want to really bring us to today. Okay. Now, let's go on to his other piece, which he wrote actually earlier, but which I felt conceptually was building on this idea. He says in the next paragraph, he says, V'hinei klipat plishtim shehi hepuch haTorah haya bedin shekodem matan Torah yachniu et klipat plishtim. He says, now let's think about this for a second. If Plishti represents this confluence of 2 different ideological evils, so then we would have expected that before the Jews received the Torah, they should have to in some way suppress or subdue this negative force in the world. Because before you ascend in holiness, you're supposed to suppress the forces of evil. That's normally the sequence in the world. You sur meira, and then va'asei tov. First you try to suppress the evil, and then you go ahead and do good. And he says we have precedents for this historically. We always find that before we build the Holy Temple, we have to first destroy the Amalekites. He says, why is that? because the function of the temple is to create an attachment between the upper realm and the lower realm. Va'amalek hu ha'nargan mafrid aluf. And he says that Amalek's function is to be the wedge that separates between heaven and earth. So therefore, mafrid, and he says on a Kabbalistic level, mafrid ben yudhe levavhe ki yadua, Amalek has that quality to divide even the divine name, whatever that means on a Kabbalistic level. Ve'alkein kodem hamishkan hayta mechiyat Amalek al yedei Yehoshua. And therefore, there was an Amalekite war that's mentioned at the end of Parshas Beshalach, the end of this week's Parsha, which is necessary in order for the Jews to be able to build a Mishkan. They need to be able to destroy Amalek or subdue Amalek to some degree. The Kodem Binyan Bayit Rishon K'tiv Ki Sheshet Chodoshim Yashav Shom Yoav V'chol Yisrael Arichrit Kol Zachar Be'edom Uv'Shas B'Vabatro She'ela Hayu Amalekim. We also find that before the building of the first temple, that Yoav is sent to wage war with people who are, according to the Talmud, Amalekites. V'kodem binyan bayit sheni hayta mechiyat Amalek b'Purim. Before the construction of the second temple, what do we have? Where's the Amalekite war there? That's the story with destroying Haman, who's the remnant, the vestige of Amalek, right? That we have to wage war with and destroy or subdue in some way before we can build the second temple with Ezra. And that's the reason for Purim, by the way. That's the reason for why the story of Purim is important, is because it's the necessary prerequisite for the building of the second temple. Okay, and then he says, "V'kodem habayit hashlishi al yedei Mashiach ben Yosef." And according to our tradition, there will be a need to destroy Amalek before the next messianic iteration of Mashiach ben Yosef. He'll be the one who wages war with Amalek. K'mochen haya b'din kodem matan Torah lahachnia klipat plishtim lema'an lo te'akev milohofia yirat shamayim ba'olam. He says, so therefore, if the Philistine quality is to be a conduit between Egypt and Canaan, and to take those two ideological forces that are antithetical to Torah, that are antithetical to a fear of God, then we would have thought that there would be a suppression of the Philistines before the giving of the Torah. And that's precisely why it says, V'lo nacham Elokim derech eretz Pelishtim. We would have expected that the first place that the Jews would have gone after leaving Egypt, on their way to receiving the Torah, would have been to go to Philistine land, to Philistine territory, because of the spiritual task of suppressing the Plishtim. The Haya Bedin Asher Od Kodem Yelchu LeSinai Lekabel HaTorah Yelchu LeEretz Plishtim Lachnia Gaon Plishtim. That's what I just said. V'achar kach misham yavo lekabel HaTorah. And only after they finished that would they go to receive the Torah. Af she'ein lahem derech LeSinai al Eretz Plishtim. He says, and that would explain why the Torah says that God did not allow them to go to the Philistine land. Well, if you look at a map, assuming that Mount Sinai is somewhere in the Sinai desert, which it may or may not be, we're not sure, but he's assuming that Mount Sinai is in the Sinai desert. Why would you take them to Philistine land in order to get to Mount Sinai? You can take them all the way east in order to bring them back west to Sinai? So, what was going on? The answer is that really that would have been the proper place to go. And now we can explain the psukim. He says, now we can understand why the Torah emphasizes Paro as being the one who escorted the Jewish people out of Egypt. Because what Paro realized was that I cannot just release the Jews from the ideological and spiritual grip that I have upon them. I'm not ready to let go. Even though I'm physically letting them go, I'm not ready to spiritually let go of them. I want to continue to maintain some kind of spiritual or ideological hold on the Jewish people, that which Mitzrayim is known for, its hallmark of being antithetical to Torah ideals. I want to maintain a hold on them. So whether there was a physical escorting of Paro of the Jewish people or not, that's irrelevant. When it says that Paro sent the Jewish people out, it means a little bit of Paro still lingered within the Jewish people as they were leaving Egypt. And therefore they did not have the spiritual strength to face up to the Philistines. Al kain lo nacham derech eretz plishtim lahachniat klipat plishtim kanal ki karovu, because they were too close. Hainu sheklipat plishtim krova leklipat Mitzrayim kanal, because the Philistines represent this amalgamation of Egypt and Canaan. And because they were still so close ideologically and spiritually to the Egyptian ideal, they could not confront an enemy that represented the very same thing that they still harbored within them, which was the Egyptian ideal. Because the Philistines, again, represent this connection, this conduit between Egypt and Canaan, and if we still possess a little bit of Egypt within us, then we're not ready to confront an enemy that we still haven't eradicated from within ourselves. V'hem ba'asher yesh lahem tziruf b'tzad ma leklipat Mitzrayim yinachem ha'am b'rotam milchama hainu milchemet ruchanit shel klipat plishtim. And that's why it says that God did not want to bring them by the Philistine territory, because they would have remorse out of seeing war, the battle. What's the battle? It's the ideological battle of trying to remove from themselves the tumah, this spiritual impurity that is represented by the Philistine people. Because if we haven't yet removed this diaspora antithesis of Torah from ourselves, we're not ready to take on an external enemy, which really is only representative of the very same thing that we possess. So therefore, God is worried. If they're going to encounter this Philistine culture, then they're going to just want to go back to Egypt. They would not be able to confront the culture of the Philistine, which he says was really all about mirth and mockery, because that's what leads to this physical abasement that Egypt was all about. V'zehu v'shavu Mitzrayim, and that's what the fear was, that they might return to Egypt. V'zerak mitam v'ahi Beshalach Paro sheliva otam, and that's because Paro was still with them. Paro was still escorting them on a either psychological, spiritual, or however you're going to describe it. Lezeh ha'itza atzat Hashem hitakum v'yasev derech hamidbar yamsuf, and that's why God made sure that when taking the Jews out, he would bring them close to the Reed Sea, to the Yamsuf. The Shama Yedei Nes Kriyas Yamsuf Kanu Yisrael Midat HaYir'ah. And it was going through that experience of the splitting of the Red Sea and having to place their complete trust in Hashem and being witness to this ultimate miracle, Kirichsiv Vayira'u Ha'amet Hashem, that they would acquire this ultimate fear of God, which would allow them to finally, once and for all, shirk from off of themselves the yoke of Paro's ideological servitude. Umilchemet Plishtim nishara limei David shenidato yirat shamayim. But they still were not ready to encounter the Plishtim, because when a Philistine enemy is a very sophisticated enemy, you have to be very spiritually sophisticated and very firm in who you are in your identity in order to be able to confront the Plishti. And therefore, many generations would have to elapse of spiritual maturation before the Jewish people would be ready to encounter the Plishtim. So we find that it wasn't until hundreds of years later, in the times of David HaMelech, like 400 years later, that is David ready to wage war with the Philistines. Why weren't the Philistines... we know that Shimshon battled with the Philistines, but he wasn't able to defeat them. It was premature. The Philistines were the neighbors of the Israelites in Eretz Yisrael once they entered into the land, but they couldn't defeat them. It was only in the times of David HaMelech where we had gained this spiritual fortification, this inner spiritual strength that David represents of Yiras Hashem, that we're able to defeat the Philistines. Ki hayam mer kavala malchut shamayim. David is known Kabbalistically as the chariot of the divine monarchy. The Yisrael b'midat ha'yirah shekanu al yamsuf halchu l'sinai lekabel ha'Torah v'lo hizike lahem klipat pelishtim. So the only thing that the Jews were able to do was to acquire this great level of Yiras Hashem, so that they could not be injured by the fact that the Philistines remained in the world. We're not ready to defeat them, because we have to be spiritually mature in order to defeat the Philistines. But at least we can go and advance onto Sinai even without defeating the Plishtim, because at least we know that we've been fortified through the experience of Kriyas Yamsuf. I think there's a lot of depth here, and there's much more to explore in this idea. But as Mrs. Sochachevsky just mentioned a moment ago, it's not a coincidence that these people who are our neighbors, who in our own lifetime were never known as Philistines, they were never known as Philistine, they were just called Arabs. They self-identified as Arabs. It was only like in 1964 you have the rise of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. Originally, Palestinians were anyone who lived in Palestine, including Jews. And now the word Palestinian refers specifically to a national entity which has ambitions of destroying the state of Israel. And how does that arise? And this is something that is really a late 20th century, early 21st century phenomenon. It arises because, as the SHMOT says, you cannot defeat the Philistines until you've reached a certain level of spiritual maturity. And it's very, very possible, although I'm not a prophet and I can't tell you for sure what the events are that are unfolding before us today, but it's very possible the fact that this Palestinian entity, this Philistine entity, has emerged with a name, with a face, and identity today, is a sign that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, Higia Hazman, the time has come for this ideological war to reach its head, to come to a head, and to reach maturity for the time of the final confrontation. This has nothing necessarily to do with what's going to unfold on the physical plane, but certainly on the spiritual or ideological plane, we definitely see an ideological battle between the God of Israel, which is what the nation of Israel represents, and all that is antithetical to the God of Israel and his Torah, which is what the Palestinian people represent, which is why you find this tremendous division within the world today based on this tiny little region in the Middle East. No one cares about what's going on in Syria. No one cares about what's going on in Sarajevo or Afghanistan or anywhere else in the world, in Africa, where people are being slaughtered wholesale. The issue is the ideological divide between the Philistine and the Israelite. And it's an ideological battle for who's going to emerge as the moral voice for mankind in this new era. And I think that's what we're seeing unfolding before us. And it is an ideological battle that we cannot afford to be caught sleeping at the wheel. We have to remain vigilant. We have to realize that there's a lot at stake here. And we have to raise the banner not only for the state of Israel as a nation of the Jewish people, but also for the Torah of Israel and for the God of Israel, because ultimately that is what those who side with the Palestinians are really fighting against. We have to keep this in mind, and hopefully this is the message that we can take out of the beginning of Parshas Beshalach, that sometimes we're not ready yet to take the Philistines on, but God has placed the Philistines in our face and is telling us the time has arrived, and now is the time to confront this enemy. Make sure that there is no remnant of Pharaoh within yourself. Make sure that you are ideologically committed to the Torah, and then take on the Philistines, take on the Palestinians. Have a great day, everybody.